Our scripture tonight is taken from the Revised Common Lectionary, and it is Psalm 43. And as I was doing some research on this, and the bulletins were already printed, I started learning things about Psalm 43, and part of it is Psalm 42 was probably originally part of Psalm 43. They're probably one psalm, so they ought to be read together. So we're actually going to do that tonight. We'll just call it Psalm 42:43. Psalm 42:43 was written roughly 1,000 years before Jesus was born. This psalm is a psalm of lament. It is a mournful prayer crying out to God. Initially, what we hear is an expression of anguish, and then the psalmist is reminded of what God has done in the past, and gradually he calms as he remembers God's saving presence in the past, and ends with a sense of hope that he will one day again give thanks. He goes from anguish to hope in one prayer. And it's not a completely smooth transition, which I think we know is usually the case when we're going through grief. So, I will be reading Psalm 42, and then Joe will be reading Psalm 43, which is in your bulletin, and we'd like for you to just hear them as one psalm. Just like a deer that craves streams of water, my whole being craves you, God. My whole being thirsts for God, for the living God. When will I come and see God's face? My tears have been my food both day and night, as people constantly question me, where's your God now? But I remember these things as I bear my soul, how I made my way to the Mighty One's abode, to God's own house, with joyous shouts and thanksgiving songs, a huge crowd celebrating the festival. Why, I ask myself, are you so depressed? Why are you so upset inside? Hope in God. Because I will again give him thanks, my saving presence and my God. My whole being is depressed. That's why I remember you from the land of Jordan and Hermon and from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the noise of your waterfalls. All your massive waves surged over me. By day the Lord commands his faithful love. By night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. I will say to God, my solid rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I have to walk around sad, oppressed by my enemies, with my bones crushed? My foes make fun of me, constantly questioning me. Where's your God now? Why, I ask myself, are you so depressed? Why are you so upset inside? Hope in God, because I will again give him thanks, my saving presence and my God.
Establish justice for me, God. Argue my case against ungodly people. Rescue me from the dishonest and unjust, because you are my God, my protective fortress. Why have you rejected me? Why do I have to walk around sad, oppressed by enemies? Send your light and truth, whose will guide me. Let them bring to your holy mountain, to your dwelling place. Let me come to God's altar. Let me come to God, my joy, my delight. Then I will give you thanks with the lyre, God, my God. Why, I ask myself, are you so depressed? Why are you so upset inside? Hope in God, because I will again give him thanks, my saving presence and my God. The word of the Lord for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. So it's All Saints Weekend, and we celebrate the saints who've gone before us. And we have this tendency, clearly, to first think of our friends and relatives who we've known and we've loved and we've had to say goodbye to. And we know, along with that this weekend's remembrance is not only for them, but it's for all the saints who have gone before us. Not just the ones we've known and loved, but all the saints who've gone before us. And what better place to get a handle on that than the historic chapel? Built in 1856, pre-Civil War. Think about the people that have been in this space. I mean, we know that the pews are different now, and we know that The floor has probably been replaced, and we know that, the organ is electric. We know that. Now, the carpet's looking rough, and it might be original. I'm not sure. But I can tell you this, these windows we're looking out, these are the windows, and some of that warbly glass, that is that warbly glass. And they were looking out on that cemetery. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. This is so amazing. I mean, I got to tell you, I come up here a couple times a week to work on my sermon. I put down words and then I say them out loud to see if they sound half smart or dorky. And then I save the stuff that I think works, right? And when I'm up here, I only do this when I'm alone. But I'll tell you what, when I'm in this space, I never feel alone. I never really feel alone. And I know there are other people who've been a part of this church for some time who know exactly what I'm talking about. So we not only have a sense of connection with the saints who are our family and our friends who've gone before us, but we also have a sense of connection with folks we've never met, with folks who worshiped before us in this chapel. And this connection comes through a sense of awareness and a love of God. And if that's the case, then can we have a sense of connection with folks from hundreds and even a few thousand years ago? For the same reason. Not that we've worshiped in the same space, but that we've worshiped the same God. Human beings all who love and respond to God, to joy and sorrow and everything in between. Why else would the Psalms still apply to us today if that weren't the case? If we weren't in some way connected to all the saints who came before us. And if that's so, then when we are in the midst of grief and significant loss in the 21st century, do we find ourselves praying and grieving in a similar way to the psalmist who lived 1,000 years before Jesus was born? I think so. Another psalm that we're all very familiar with, most beloved psalm in this country, and one that many have committed to memory, is Psalm 23, the one that begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Grief and despair are described as a dark valley that we move through. We don't get lost because our shepherd God is always with us, even in the pain, even in despair, even in the dark, even when we cannot see where we're going and we have no idea what the future holds. We trust and move through this dark space, and it is painful and difficult, but necessary. And eventually, we do come through, and we are in the midst of a new normal. And God is still with us. So in the year 1969, or 1969, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, author of the book On Death and Dying, named the stages of grief. And nearly 50 years later, we are still using those stages. They prove to be quite accurate. These stages of grief begin with denial and end with acceptance, and between we have anger, bargaining, and depression. I think these are the territory we cover as we move through that dark valley. And so, as human beings, wouldn't our prayers in the midst of grief in some way reflect these stages? Sure. And why wouldn't this be true throughout the centuries, even as far back as the psalmists? I mean, let's consider this. When was the last time for you that God seemed very far away? The last time you were working through grief? Now, some of you, you're in the midst of grief. Some of you have just come out of a difficult time, and some of you are probably moving into it. When was the last time that God seemed far away? There is a sense of denial when we are looking at a very difficult time. When we get that sudden news that we didn't want to have, that might have to do with health, might have to do with a relationship or work, a number of things that can be frightening and turn our life upside down. The very first stage we go through is denial. It's the most natural thing in the world, and this is when we, in general, are just thinking, no, this can't be true, this isn't happening, God wouldn't allow this, I'm fine, Lord, I know that you're there, and I know you'll take care of this. It's like we're going around in bubble wrap, and the thing is, we need it. We need it. There is a point to every one of these stages, and it has everything to do with healing. And in the beginning, we need to be protected that way. But after a while, when things are not going the way we think, one of these other three center, the anger or bargaining or depression come along, and these can come in any order. But anger may come along and it's like, no, you know what, I'm not fine. I'm not fine. Where are you, Lord, and why won't you help me? I mean, we can become furious with God. Furious with God. And the first time this happens, it can be a little startling and a little frightening. And it's also a healing stage. And it's absolutely necessary. The next stage that comes when getting angry at God doesn't seem to change anything and everything's still going south is bargaining. Okay, I mean, I've done this before. Lord, okay, here's the deal. You know what I need. You know what I want. Really what I want is for what happened to have not happened and to go back to what was, which is impossible. But if you could make something like that happen, if you do that for me, I'll do this for you. And you fill in the blank with whatever it is that you think God is wanting you to do. We make some big promises to God if God will just fix it. And then when that doesn't happen, depression sets in. Depression sets in. Sorrow and tears, which is an absolutely essential part of healing. Lord, where are you? Where are you? We can take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back with any one of these stages. And all the time, hopefully, we are in prayer. Whether we're sad or angry or in denial. Eventually, we will get to this place of acceptance. You'll know you're getting there when you're starting not to feel so rotten. When your sleep patterns improve. When you start looking forward to getting up in the morning. When you start to feel better, feel calmer. You start looking forward to things again. Oh, Lord, there you are. There you are. We've all moved through our own unique experiences of the dark valley. Some of us have done this multiple times. The longer you live, the more you get to do this, right? Moving through these stages of grief, these stages of healing, doing our best to trust that God really is with us every step of the way, praying all the while, Lord, where are you? And gradually, moving from anguish to hope, from denial to acceptance, living through our very own psalm of lament, just like all the saints who've gone before us. Thanks be to God. Amen.